everyone, our topic to be discussed is about writing a literary analysis. So, elements of literature. There are some of the elements that can be the focus of a literary analysis. So, there are 5 elements of literature. Let's start with plot. Plot the series of events in the story, beginning, middle, end. So, in literature, the plot encompasses all the incident and provide aesthetic pleasure. Plot divided into act and scene. Plot has 5 essential parts. Exposition, the start or introduction of the story. This is where characters and setting are introduced. Rising action, all of the events that take place leading up to the climax. So climax is the most exciting part of the story. Falling action, the immediate reaction to the climax. Resolution, the conclusion of the story or plot. Characters, the people, animals in the story who carry out the action. So characters are one of the most important story elements. So character can think, feel, or act. For example, a story might be about a boy and his teddy bear. Of course, the boy is a character because he's a person. If the teddy bear is just a regular toy, then it wouldn't be a character. But if the teddy bear can think, feel, move, or maybe even talk, then it will be a character in the story. Setting, the where and when the story take place. The setting is the time and place of a story. So time may be in the past or in the future, in the daytime or at night, in the summer or winter. A story might take place in a school, in a jungle, in a big city, in the desert, or in a variety of other places. For example, I was walking in the park on a warm day. The text tells you, I'm in a park, it's warm, and day-night. Theme, the central belief of the story, usually something abstract that unifies the whole plot like love, friendship, etc. Theme is a message or meaning in a literature. The story is that, for example, the story is that loving your family is the most important. The theme of the story is that money cannot buy happiness. So when you read a text, look for the message or the meaning that's in there, and that will be your theme. Because oftentimes we can make a sentence out of it or a statement out of it. Tone, the attitude that a writer has toward the subject. So we're gonna talk about tone. So tone is the writer attitude about a subject. So think that tone coming from the author, coming from the writer, coming from the speaker. So that's where tone is coming from. You see humorous tone, serious tone, and frustrated tone. Here's an example. A teacher in front of the classroom who says, everyone here is very smart and everyone is able to do well in this class. It is going to be a great year and we are all going to succeed. So clearly the tone here is a very positive and a very encouraging tone.
Good day everyone, so I'm Margie Mulawan and I am discussing you about literary criticism approaches. So literary criticism is the comparison, analysis, interpretation, and or evaluation of words of literature. It evaluates the value and merit of literacy work using certain parameters. Approaches are concepts in literature. Approaches to literary criticism are used as basis of literary analysis. So these are the 10 literary approaches, which is gisulat na lang nako siya tanan for you to provide you kanang dili mo magsigig kanang balik-balik. Ako na lang siyang sulat tanan. So first, the biographical approach, which is this approach begins with the simple but central insight that literature is written by actual people. Therefore, understanding an author's life can help readers more thoroughly comprehend the work. So hints to if often affords a practical method by which readers can better understand a text. However, a biographical critic must be careful not to take the biographical facts of a writer's life too far in criticizing the works of that writer. So the biographical critic focuses on explicating the literary work by using the insight provided by knowledge of the author's lives. Biographical data should be amplified the meaning of the text, not down it out with the irrelevant material. Second, the historical approach. This approach seeks to understand the literary work by investigating the social, cultural, and intellectual context that precede it. A context that necessarily includes the artist's biography in milieu. A key goal of a key goal for historical critics is to understand the effect of a literary work upon its original readers. Third, the gender approach, which is this approach examines how sexual identity influences the creation and reception of literary works. Originally an offshoot of feminist movements, gender criticism today includes a number of approaches, including the so-called masculinist approaches recently advocated by poet Robert Pilley. The bulk of gender criticism, however, is feminist and takes as a central receipt that the the part the patriarchal attitude that have dominated Western thought have resulted consciously or unconsciously in literature full of unexamined male-produced assumptions. So, the mythological approach. So, this approach emphasizes the recurrent universal patterns underlining most literary works, combining the insights from anthropology, psychology, history, and comparative religion. Methodological criticism explores the artist's common humanity by tracing how the individual imagination uses myths and symbols common to different cultures and epochs. So, a reader response approach. This approach takes as fundamental tenet that literature exists not as the artifact upon a pretend page but as a transaction between the physical text and the mind of the reader. So it attempts to describe what happened in the reader's mind while interpreting a text and reflects that reading like writing in a creative process. So according to the reader response critics, literary texts do not contain a meaning. Meanings derive only from the acts of individual readers. Hence, two different readers may derive completely different interpretations of the same literacy text. Likewise, a reader who reads a work years later may find the work shockingly different. Readers' response criticism then emphasizes how religious, cultural, and social values affect readings. It also overlaps with gender criticism in exploring how men and women read the same text with different assumptions. Though this approach rejects the notion that a single correct reading exists for a literary work, it does not consider all readings permissible. Each text create limits to its possible interpretation. So, lahi tag interpretation as a response of kung magbasa ta, lahi-lahi jud tag interpretation. So, theoretical approach. A set of statements or principles devised to explain a group of facts or phenomena, especially one that has been repeatedly tested or are widely accepted and can be used to make predictions about natural phenomena. It examines different applications of the theory in literary fields such as modern poetry, autobiography, or the post-colonial novel. So that's the theoretical approach. So let's go to psychological approach. So this approach reflects the effect that modern psychology has had upon both literature and literary criticism. So fundamental figures in psychological criticism includes Sigmund Freud, whose psychoanalytic theories change our notions of human behavior by exploring new or controversial areas like wise fulfillment. So sexuality, the unconscious, and repression, as well as expanding our understanding of how language and symbols operate by demonstrating their ability to reflect conscious fears or desires. And Carl Jung, whose theories about the unconscious are also a key fundamental of me, mythological criticism. So, psychological criticism has a number of approaches, but in general, it usually employs one or more of three approaches. So, an investigation of the creative process of the artist. What is the nature of literary genius and how does it relate to normal mental functions? So, the psychological study of the particular artist, usually nothing how an author's biographical circumstances affect or influence their motivation and or behavior. The analysis of action characters using the language and method of psychology. So moralist approach focuses individuals, couples, families, and professionals and moralistic definition of relationship, life, and family process that presumes a moral ascendancy of one value system over others. So that's a moralist approach. So sociological approach. This approach examines literature in the cultural, economic, and political context in which it is written or received, exploring the relationship between the artist and society. Sometimes it examines the artist's society to better understand the author's literary works. Other times, it may examine the representation of such societal elements with the literature itself. So, one influential type of sociological criticism is the Marxist criticism, which focuses on the economic and political elements of art, often emphasizing the ideological content of literature. So, Marxist criticism often argues that all art is political, either challenging or endorsing by silence. So the status quo, it is a frequently evaluative and judgmental, a tendency that can lead to reductive judgment, as when Soviet critics and critics rated Jack London better than William Faulkner, Ernest Hemingway, Edith Ranton, and James because he illustrated the principle of class struggle more clearly. So, formalist approach. This approach regards literature as a unique form of human knowledge that needs to be examined on its own terms. All the elements necessary for understanding the work are contained with the work itself. Of particular interest to the formalist critic are the elements of form, style, structure, tone, imagery, etc. That are found within the text. So, a primary goal for formalist critics is to determine how such elements work together with the text content and shape its effects upon readers.
I'm Jennifer Rubiliar, and let's talk about writing a literary analysis. First is introduction. The introduction should capture the reader's interest. You may use quotation, question, vivid description, startling fact, etc. A quotation helps to your thesis offers a second voice that echoes your thoughts, beliefs, and claims. They said it better. Quotations provide a better way of saying things. They give you a more concise, memorable phrasing for an idea. And also the vivid description helps you the words create a connection to the reader's senses. As a starter followed by an introduction about and a summary of the literary piece, lastly, your introduction must clearly state a thesis statement. The thesis statement must be specific, arguable, and focus on any of the elements of the literary piece. It may also be anchored on an approach. The approach may help you construct a thesis statement. The most important thing to include when writing an introduction in your thesis, a thesis statement is the main point of your paper. It is narrow, focused, and specific. A thesis can be something you are going, or it can be something you are going against. Whatever the case, be sure to include it. Second is the body. The body is the development of the thesis statement. Each paragraph in the body has a topic sentence that supports the thesis statement, and each topic sentence is elaborated with evidences. Question: why each paragraph in the body has a topic sentence that support the thesis statement? Because supporting sentences give a reader details to understand a main idea or evidence to show why a claim is true or correct. Each body paragraph will have supporting sentences that discuss the idea or ideas in your topic sentence, using examples and or evidence to support the discussion. This evidence can be quotes from researcher resources, personal experience and observation, statistic, stories, or examples. Third is conclusion. Conclusion should echo the thesis statement. It should not be presenting new ideas which were not developed in the body. So conclusion is the last thing the reader will see, so it tends to stick in the reader's memory. It's also a great place to remind the reader exactly why your topic is important. A conclusion is more than just the last paragraph. It's a working part of the paper. Conclusion is intended to help the reader understand why your research should matter to them after they have finished reading the paper. Last is the references. The references list entries cited in the literary analysis text. References is important because references should always be accurate, allowing your readers to trace the sources of information you have used. The best way to make sure your reference accurately is to keep a record of all the sources you use when reading and researching for an thesis statement. So that's all, and thank you.